And it goes a little something like.
Hello everyone, welcome to Sumi Huddle. Today we have brilliant Samantha Elia as our guest. She's a feminist program manager, a researcher, and knowledge producer working at the intersection of decolonial practice, care work, and storytelling. At the FES, Samantha leads feminist programs across the SWANA region. She supports collective research and publishing initiatives that center the lived experiences of migrant women, queer communities, and feminist organizers across the borders. We are so excited for this chat, so let's go ahead and start. Hi, Samantha. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm very excited to be with both of you.
Yes,
Thanks for having me.
of course, us too. I know I made a little introduction, but before we dive in, we'd love to hear your path in your own words. What drew you into this work and how your journey has shaped the way you approach it today?
First of all, again, thanks so much. I really appreciate the time you both have put to look into this and draft the questions and have this conversation with me. So thank you a lot for that. I think, like, if I am to go back, what drew me to start this or to be the person I am, I think, like many women growing up in the region where I grew up, a lot of us didn't really choose to be feminist, or we were not aware that we were feminist. It's all started as a reaction to what felt unjust around us, and we slowly started to fit into the framework of it per se. And some of them never choose to identify with this framework or live with it, but I did. I remember a couple of events in my childhood where that feeling of injustice started to form. And like one of them was when I was a child, when I was a little girl. I have a brother, and my brother is like 5 years older than me. And there were a lot of things I wasn't allowed to do that he was allowed to do. And the basic justification was because he's a boy. Like he's a boy was a full argument. You
Yeah.
didn't need any
Question.
more, like any follow up. Like he's a boy is the argument. And that made me furious. Like I felt it in my body. And I felt it for years. Like it followed me into my 20s. I had a fight with my parents about it in my 20s. So I was like really furious. And then as a teenager, I also remember another incident. We used to have a migrant domestic worker who lived and worked in our house. And I really loved her. Like she stayed in our house for like 9 or 10 years. And when I knew her, I was like 8. So she left a deep mark of motherhood in me. So I loved her really like a lot. And I remember that when she was sad, I would be very sad. And she was very often sad, and rightfully so, because like the situations they live in are like horrible. Even if my parents did not like like treat her in violent ways physically, but still they live in very unfair situation. And I didn't have the word for it, that anger that I felt with her, but I knew something was wrong. And I think those two instances in my early memories really like it's the moment where injustice landed for me. It was like not about something being unfair, but something being really emotional and really deeply felt. So yeah, it stayed with me. And then when I was at university, I got involved in youth organizing in feminist and queer spaces. And that's when things started to come together with other people's experiences. So I began to connect to others and to how I felt growing up. And I started to be able to categorize these. Like, okay, so this is gender, this is class, this is labor, this is race, this is sect. And this is when politics started to translate more for me, especially in terms of working. And today I have that job, which is a good job. I manage the feminist portfolio at the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung in the SWANA region. I work very closely with feminist movements and collectives. I support feminist knowledge production. I try to challenge how development programs are designed and implemented, especially when it comes to gender, care, migration, sexuality, but also to neocolonial structures. So I try a lot to decolonize how things are done. And yeah, that's it.
It's
Sorry, if I
lived
overtalked.
experience. Oh, no, not at all. So your work actually comes from lived experiences as well, the things lived as a child and carry to your adult life. Most women, I think that's the case. We see the injustice like happening in real time, real experiences, and then it's like you do something about it because you want it to change. There's no question about it. or what ifs. And yeah, thank you for your answer. That was really sincere, I would say.
I feel like it speaks to perhaps like all women, but I would say that as a Turkish woman, it does speak to me too, because you live within those structures that oppress you. And I really liked how you said then it started to translate, because you have the push to be a feminist or the activist, then you understand how to sort of say and talk about it. You have these lived experiences and then you find the words for it. And I think that connects really well to our second question. We want to talk a little bit more about language. And your work touches on decolonization as well. And specifically, the term SWANA is being used more now, or at least there's a shift toward it instead of MENA. So I was thinking, this is framed as a decolonial choice usually, and we know that you also frequently use SWANA in your work too. I'd like to ask your take on the issue. What are some critiques of the term, and why is SWANA seen as more intentional or liberatory alternative for you?
Thanks for that question. I think it's important to highlight that, first of all, for those listening, like MENA is Middle East and North Africa, right? And SWANA is Southwest Asia and North Africa. So the issue really lies in the first two letters of the acronym, ME, Middle East, which has colonial roots. The term was first used, I think, in the early 1900s by British and Americans. And it was, interestingly, it was used to refer to the area between Arabia and India, so mostly focusing on the Persian Peninsula or the Persian Gulf. So, because that Gulf had like deep interest for the British Empire. But over time, especially with the rise of oil politics in the region, with post-colonial military strategy, with ongoing foreign intervention in our region, the term expanded and the region expanded with it, right? So it started to include Eastern Mediterranean region, the Arabian Peninsula, and even parts of North Africa they call the Middle East. So when they don't want to say MENA, they would say the Middle East and they would consider like, yeah, all this region, right? So basically, whatever suits Western politics or economic agendas. So when we say MENA is a colonial term or a geopolitical construct, that's what we mean. So it reflects how Western powers have historically framed the region, not through actually how people from the region see themselves or how we identify with it, but through what was useful to Western powers. So when I say Middle East, I always like question like middle of what, like east of what, like what are you? What Middle East is such a weird term to throw out there, but actually it's the middle and the east of Europe, like in relationship to Europe. So it reinforces that our existence is only relevant when in relationship to Europe. Otherwise, we don't have a position. So that's why I think feminist and progressive groups began using SWANA as an alternative. So more in geographical terms, Southwest Asia as the continent. So it's more geographically grounded without centering Europe. It also has a political choice, right? So when you say SWANA right now in any circle, it's as if you're making a stand, as you are refusing to name yourself through colonial frameworks. And an attempt to redefine the region, right? But even if I say that and I do use SWANA, that I don't believe that SWANA is perfect at all. I think that there are three main reasons why SWANA could be problematic. First of all, because still, when you say Southwest Asia and North Africa, as if it's one region per se, but the region is so diverse and it's so fragmented and it has sub-region like the Levant, like the Gulf, like the Maghreb, etc. And each of us have their own history, their own politics, their own languages. People from different sides of the region sometimes don't even understand each other's Arabic or each other's languages, or even we don't understand the reality of the other. We are so far away, we have different realities. Second of all, in daily life, like no one identify with SWANA. If you go to Rabat or even here in Beirut, no one would say, yes, I am from SWANA. That's not a thing we say. People more relate to their national identity, like I'm from that country, or from the cultural identity, like I'm Amazigh, or other types of identity. And finally, we must not forget that even continents, like drawing like the continental border, they are colonial. Like they are not purely, someone named them, right? These continents. And it's basically a European construct as well. So they were not divided purely based on geography or purely based on how indigenous people understood their borders. So that's also a reminder that even geography is not apolitical. It's not only a science. It's purely like it has a lot of political aspects to it. So why I do think that SWANA is useful, especially in activist and political and academic circle. I think that one must use it very critically because otherwise it will end up reproducing the same kind of flattening of the region that MENA does. So I think it's better to use it with being aware of its limitation. So yeah.
It's always interesting to hear about these things because you never think how much language affects how you see things. But especially, I'd say I wrote my thesis and I used MENA, for example, there as well. You know, as an academic, for example, the fact that you write that down in a thesis where everything else is factual, but you're very right, the middle of what basically that's just adjectives. So it does feel weird, and I think it sort of teaches you stuff by repetition. So it is very interesting to think about this. I know that we uh, activists and feminists sometimes get a bad rap about how much we focus on rhetoric, but it does, I think, is important in terms of empowerment. I haven't heard of SWANA that much before meeting you, to be perfectly honest. I'm surprised that I never even thought to question MENA before. So
Talking about language, I want to, of course, mention your recent projects, the Transformative Arabic Language Guide. This feels like such a powerful reflection of your collective and political approach to language. You and your collaborators created a resource that not only challenges inherited terms, but also opens up space for more inclusive feminist expressions in Arabic. So while you were working on this guide, how did it came together? What it taught you both about the language and also about the process of working collectively across a complex terrain? Like you mentioned, Arabic is very diverse. The cultures are very diverse. So can you talk a bit about the process?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, this is my newest baby. So, like, like the most precious now. So, basically, this guide is a collection of 12 guidelines and more than 300 terms translated from English to Arabic. And the attempt to make Arabic less gendered. As much as possible, less gendered and more transformative. We use the word transformative rather than inclusive because we want this intention, like we want to push the language a little bit. We don't want to just say, okay, just put male, like male and female adjectives, right? No, we want to push it a little bit. So what can we do to actually transform that sandwich completely to erase the binary? Let's not have a binary, which is very challenging. But so this is the tool that we try to create, and it's like we are targeting mostly writers, translators, editors, researchers, and also everyone who's interested in it to try to challenge those inherited norms we have in Arabic to make it more inclusive, more feminist per se. And I think it's important before I even really answer the question to highlight that when you create any type of publication or knowledge production material, you hold power. You have power. You have power of putting something out in the world. And that power, I don't feel it's neutral. I think there is a lot of risk that comes with it. Even if we have the best intentions when we are developing it, and even if we say like we don't want to be exclusionary at all, we are definitely going to exclude people. It's definitely going to be incomplete. And I think it's important to highlight this. And it's important to acknowledge that even like we are treating this guide not at all as an authority. We think it has no authority. It's just a live document, and people are more than welcome to criticize it, to build on it, to disagree with it, so that it actually can evolve. Now, going back to why we did this document, we have been creating knowledge at FES in Lebanon, but in the region for a long while already, and especially feminist knowledge in Arabic. And we have always faced a lot of challenges and obstacles. Like sometimes we would have one term and it would take us days to come up with a translation for it. I'm not even joking. We will send to WhatsApp groups to all our friends. We will fight with the editor. It will take so long to come up with a translation for that term that everyone would be satisfied in. And then after 3 months, we would forget that we had this discussion. And then we will have this term again, and then it all starts all over again. And then people from the region, like from other offices, also told us the same thing, like, hey, how do you translate this term? So we were like, okay, we need a guide. We need something that would make us, we don't want to stop having these conversations, but we want to have them a little bit less. So let's have a guide that will put these terms there. So basically, it started as an internal document. We had no intention of publishing it outside of FES. But as we were developing it, we got really excited. We were like, oh my God, look at this term, look at this term. And then we launched last year already the internal version, and we felt it's a shame. We have to make it more public. So we put more effort into it. We included a lot of our feminist friends and circles, queer people, and in the discussion, especially when we had like questions about terms related to queer people. We had also focus group discussions on the most controversial terms. And we launched the public version this year, which is the version now available online. And I feel like we discovered through all these conversations that our conversations were not technical at all. It was not like, does this translation technically mean the same word in English? No, it was a political discussion. Like, if I say this word, what kind of political weight will it have on the people it represents? So this is also like how we felt like, okay, so this discussion is transformative by itself because we had no interest in translating word to word the terms. We wanted to make the people feel the same thing, or at least make it as inclusive as possible when a word is translated. And I think in this guide, and again, talking about the transformative element, we did not want to provide one word for each word. We wanted to provide a list of words for each English word. And I think that's also like part of the challenge we had. So depending on each context, you can translate a term to mean a certain thing that would represent certain people. And I think that's part of the most enriching aspect of it, is that that richness in vocab that we have in Arabic to translate the same word in English. And I want to be clear that we are not trying to destroy the Arabic language. We got attacked a lot online. Like, we are not trying to attack the Arabic language at all. Language is dynamic. Like, Arabic is so old and so big, and it has been shaped by so many civilizations. The Persian, the Turkish, so many Arabic work are from Turkish roots. The Amazigh, many more cultures have influenced that language per se. It's a strong language. It can do it, like no one is trying to destroy it. It's strong enough and it can hold everything. So maybe it can also hold feminism. Maybe it can also hold queer. Like, why are we only thinking like, no, don't destroy it when it comes to gender? No, like, I think it can hold it and it can absorb it. So yeah, what we're trying to do is just expanding it in a way so that it can include those terms.
In fact, I think it makes the language stronger because a lot of the terms in feminism, in queer theory, they start with English. They're already westernized. So actually taking that and applying to your language where it feels good in the context and also like you said, the people that it represents, I think it's even making the language stronger, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is the problem with English, is that it's imperial. Every knowledge production, every progressive knowledge production is now made in English, which makes all our all languages are indigenous, but which makes languages that are specific to certain places right now just translation languages, not knowledge production languages. And I think that's a problem, but like in itself. So we need to rethink about this. Yeah.
We talk so much about language and how important it is to use it for your own empowerment. It is very liberatory to find your own language to describe things, and I think a lot of your work focuses on that aspect of storytelling and language. You have migrant domestic worker testimonies. You have a children's book on Arab feminists. You mentioned that adults in the book launch also ended up learning just as much as the children, if not more. And I was wondering what you think that it tells us about feminist memory and the gaps we still have in the knowledge. And how do you see these projects contributing to intergenerational learning and feminist movement building for you?
Yeah, I think like storytelling and oral storytelling mostly has always been central to feminist work and to how women relate to each other. For many women in our region, it's been also a survival tool. Long before there was platforms, long before there was publication or social media, women passed down knowledge and care through oral storytelling. Take for example, like Palestinian women in refugee camps. For decades, no one cared to write down their lived experience. People wrote about them from the outside, but no one cared to go and tell them, okay, let's write what you know. Only recently you see more feminist efforts to do that. But for a long time, these stories were completely excluded from written history. It was only through oral storytelling that they preserved that collective memory, the personal accounts of displacement, the loss, everyday survival, etc. So this is something I think I value deeply because I feel like without this kind of knowledge, we wouldn't really know women's history, like from a woman's perspective. Otherwise, the only version we have from ourselves is what men wrote about us. This is the only thing we know about our rights, our life before, is how men wrote about us. When we created the children's book, it was insane for me that there was no children's book about women in politics in Arabic. That didn't exist. It wasn't there. And we as an organization do not work with children. Our target group is never children. And I made it a point like this has to exist. Otherwise, there is no collective memory of these feminists for children. They wouldn't know them. Feminism is erased from children's knowledge, from education in general, and from history. And at the launch of the book, as you said, it was so surprising that adults like they were shushing their children like shh. They wanted to listen to the story of women. It was really funny. They were asking questions, they were being interested. And that moment made it clear, like, oh my God, there's a big gap. It's not an innocent gap for me. It's very systemic. It's a deliberate choice to exclude these women. So most of this made me realize that when people say things like, yeah, of course, my daughter goes to school, it's as if it has always been the case that daughters went to school or girls, or that men made the effort for women to go to school. You know, like that thing that you take so normally right now has been the struggle of so many women for so many years that you don't even know the name of. And that for me was like a shock and it was painful. And I also didn't know it. Like, it's not that I came from a position of knowledge. I also had no idea. It was only through doing that research that I realized that, okay, Arab feminists have fought, organized, and demanded for change, and that need to be documented. So many of the rights we feel granted, like education, like voting, they didn't just appear. They weren't gifted by progressive male leaders or men. They were pushed. They were pushed by feminists who organized, who suffered. And if we don't keep telling those stories, those feminists will be erased, and that shouldn't be the case. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not that far behind. And I guess if you imagine that it's that far behind and it's that not only you erase the people that fought for it, but also I think it's a way of escapism saying that, oh, it's all good now, than to see how much more progress can be made. I wanted to also say, when you were talking, I remembered one of the projects that we made in Istanbul Gender Museum that I think is one of my favorite projects. And it was about like leftist women in Turkey and their history and their archive. And that for me showed me that there is no political tendency that escapes from erasing women from history. You would say the last history narrative that you see people erasing women from the narrative would be the leftist. But no, there were so many people that I had never heard of, and I still keep discovering. I think it's a fight that we fight on all fronts, but I think we're getting there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's zoom out a little bit and look at the US, Europe, and also the SWANA region. We're seeing the rise of right-wing and populist politics in these regions, and as we know, they often challenge or suppress the feminist and liberatory movements we've been talking about. So, from your perspective, what are some powerful moments of resistance or hope that stand out to you? Because we talked about this before, when we fall into despair, it's as though we don't care because despair gets you nowhere either. So you have to, take action and stay hopeful and optimistic as possible. Where do you find moments like this? And looking ahead, what possibilities or openings do you see for feminist movements in the region?
Yeah, I think when like this is one of the main topics right now in feminist groups, and I don't think we're living through a moment of anti-feminism only. I think we're living through a moment where anti-rights movements in general are gaining momentum. These movements are also anti-queer, anti-refugees, anti-poor, anti-migrant, and they're coordinated. They work with each other and they work well with each other and they are reinforcing each other. Let's take for Germany as an example, which is a country that is globally regarded as a champion for human rights and feminist foreign policy. At the same time, we're seeing currently troubling contradictions, like, for example, tightening asylum policies in the countries, increased pressure on refugee communities, a growing climate where solidarity with Palestine or solidarity with anti-racist work or feminist organizing are being questioned, they're being defunded, they're being criminalized. These shifts may not always be framed or looked at as anti-rights, but they mirror a global pattern of shrinking civic space and where a selective solidarity, like, okay, this you can do, this you can't do, right? Even though both of these things are related to human rights. But that's not only in the West. Like I took Germany only as an example, but also in Lebanon, we're seeing aggressive crackdown on Syrian refugees. Not that that didn't exist before, but now like there is a huge campaign, eviction, curfews, hate campaigns. In Tunisia, for example, Black sub-Saharan migrants are scapegoated and they're violently expelled from the country. And I don't think these are isolated policies. I think they are all part of a shared playbook. And what connects them is fear of dissent, it's fear of redistribution, and the fear of solidarity across borders. And yet, in the midst of all of this, there are still powerful moments of feminist resistance. Like in Sudan, for example, women are leading neighborhood-based mutual aid efforts. They're documenting war crimes. They're continuing to organize even under extreme conditions. Because also what's happening in Sudan is a genocide. People don't talk about it as much, but it's very, very bad. And women are organizing. In Palestine, even queer groups have continued to exist even under siege. They care and they provide solidarity in the face of both military violence, but also of their social exclusion, right? Their work refused to separate gender justice from anti-colonial struggle. They link them, and I think that's important. In Lebanon as well, I think collectives are, for example, you have feminist farmers that are centering land and food justice. I think there are many informal care networks for migrant workers, also for trans people. People are working to preserve and archive feminist histories and oral histories. So that gives me hope, and I think it matters that these don't exist only because they exist, but I think the importance is the connection between them. So the far right, as I said, and the anti-right movements are coordinated. They fund each other, they echo each other's, they use the same lingo, and they build power together. So I think we have to do the same. Feminist movements need to think transnationally. They would need to work across borders. They need to work intersectionally, and with more intentions, like link economic justice to gender justice, to climate justice, to racial justice, to decolonization. And I think that would do the work. That would bring a more powerful aspect to feminist work.
Yeah, when we
Yeah.
choose what to stand for, totally miss the point that, like you said, everything is interconnected. Climate justice heavily connects to gender justice and also, poverty, forced labor. So like it keeps going. It's almost like a domino effect, I would say. And I think we're aware of this, the more hopeful we can get, I hope.
I
Yeah.
feel the same in the sense that perhaps Umay would remember yesterday we were having this discussion with a few of our colleagues, and we were all complaining about political climate of the world and of the country. And I think what these sort of consistent oppression and instability does to a person is to mostly feel alone. That is, at least for me, has always been the core of my hopelessness. So whenever I'm on the streets with people, or working on a project with like-minded people, perhaps from across the world, it just gives you a newfound sense of like action and energy. So I completely agree that the best way to move forward in a very general sense of the world is find some friends and
Yeah.
to them.
Build community.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this is a very, I think, nice note to sort of close a little bit, because this is exactly what we're trying to do here. But before we close, I also want to ask you a general sort of question, a personal reflection. Is there a particular issue or project that you're currently passionate about that keeps you up at night? This is a question that we ask everybody, and it's always fun to hear the answer. I always say it could even be like a neighborhood brawl. That's just something that you're very fired up about.
I think there is a project right now that I have been thinking about implementing and designing for a couple of years, and that this year I finally like found the partner local organization that would actually do it. We're planning to design a feminist tour of Beirut. So, you know, like how you usually take tours in cities and capitals, we decided to do a feminist one for Beirut. So basically, how to reimagine the city through a feminist lens, like the stories, the places, the people, the movements. And I think this has been really putting some adrenaline in me. So I'm really excited. It's still in its early phases. I think it will be done by the end of the year, but I feel like it's going to be quite rich, and I'm very excited for it. So that I think this is my newest upcoming baby.
It's such a good idea. I'm so inspired to do this for Istanbul or some other
Yes.
city that I know, because I'm sure so much could come up. That's amazing. Such a good idea.
Yeah, I think you should go for it.
Can we actually join the tour in Beirut if we were to come there? Or
Of course, of course. We're doing a version in Arabic and we're doing a version in English, so that foreigners get to know the city through feminist lens, but also people from the country get to know it. So, and we will have a bunch next year of free tours. I'll give you the dates when they come out, but I think we're gonna have eight tours next year, all of them free of charge. So yeah, I'll let you know.
yeah,
A great to visit Beirut, I say.
Yes.
together. So
Cool.
really nice. Yeah, that was a really good closing. Thank you, Samantha. And also thank you for coming here, taking the time, sharing your insights. This is my first time meeting Samantha, but you're so friendly and you're so passionate about your work that I'm just so comfortable talking to you and hearing your work. Where can people reach out to you? Which platforms do you mainly use?
I'm mainly on LinkedIn, so please feel free to include my link under it. I'll be happy to answer any question that pops up. And also, I'm so happy to have done this with both of you, really. Like, thank you so much for your engagement. I'm so happy to have known you and get the chance to know you better. And Umay, it's very nice to meet you for the first time. I think this was a nice icebreaker for us.
I'll see you in Beirut next time, hopefully.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Just let me know the dates.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything, Samantha.
Thank you.